What's up, folks? Welcome back to the stream. It is Monday. We are indulging in a little bit of mayhem today, talking about some of the massive Team 40K events that went down over the weekend. That includes the ATC, American Team Challenge. At one point it was a challenge, and at one point it was a championship. I think it's a championship, but it does change periodically, so we're going to go with that. That hosted both 8 and 5-player team events, largest event of 40K for the weekend. In combined, I think, over 500 players between the two team events, which is really cool, but we also had a couple of other smaller ones, including the Heroes Cup. And so I figured it would be cool to go through some of the winning team compositions, the championship. Yeah, indeed. Go through some of the winning compositions and talk about what exactly is doing well in Team 40K. Now, I know Team 40K is kind of its own can of worms. A lot of times you are taking things in order to diversify your disposition lineup. There are some interesting little idiosyncrasies for team events that you will have to keep in track of versus the standard format. The big one being that your team can't duplicate factions, and it also can't duplicate dispositions, and in 8 players it can't duplicate dispositions more than once. So you can have 2 of any particular disposition, but you can never ever have 3. So it does alter the detachment selections that you might be picking for a specific faction quite a bit. And then obviously the scoring system is pretty different. Now, it should be noted that the ATC, which is going to be the biggest event that we are discussing today, ended up, I think, altering the team mechanics a little bit. The core sort of 40K team tournament companion that is available on the 40K app does specify that when you input your attacker and defender selections, the player who is the defender in the team pairing process remains the defender in the actual game. So they'll be able to deploy the first unit. And I think that ATC decided to ignore that. It did construct some weird situations where you could first defender with a particular army that was like a jail army with a bunch of infiltrators, for example, and you could get first drop, first terrain pick, and then first deployment. And the combination of those could make it very difficult to stop like really aggressive plays in some cases. So the one that I think a lot of people put out was like if you allowed that, you could play like Mont Ka-Tau on Dawn of War deployments, choose your layout based on the disposition between you and your opponent, and then block all of their opportunities to stop your scout moves. So you basically just get like free reign of the board on turn 1. And then if you go first, you just shoot them to death. Probably not a particularly healthy, like sort of composition. If you just fill the middle of the board with Pathfinders and then you scout a bunch of piranhas into them, basically later on, that could be really bad. So they decided not to play with that for the weekend, so that's important to note. And then obviously, like all the weird idiosyncrasies that come with team events are also in place. But it will give us a good opportunity to take a look at what is a sort of cutting edge for not only this alternate format, but also stuff that's good in general. In 40K, because nobody's taking an army that is just straight up bad to a team event. So the winning one for the biggest one here, the 8-player ATC team event, is Nemesis. Nemesis also did very well. We saw them. I think they did well at Nemesis. They did well at the Battle for Salvation when we streamed that earlier this year. And they also won. They did end up losing that to Stat Check, I believe. But they also won the ACO 5-player team finals. So Nemesis looking pretty good as a team, especially sort of within the continental US. I would say one of, if not the highest performing team in the last 6 to 12 months or so. But we can talk about what is being played currently, and as we can see, we have different sort of diversified all of our selections here. What's interesting is that we've duplicated Purge the Foe. So with 8 picks, you have to duplicate at least 3 of them for dispositions. In 5-player teams, you just take 1 of each disposition, essentially. Oops, excuse me. And what's interesting is that they took we're duplicating Purge the Foe, we're duplicating priority assets, and we're duplicating Take and Hold. Now, Take and Hold, I think, it makes a lot of sense. It's extremely consistent. I think in my experience so far, and obviously this is very limited, it seems like it is the most consistent of the different dispositions. I don't know if it has any particularly like massive glaring holes in its disposition matrix. Essentially, it seems like a lot of its own primary missions are just about, moving up and taking board space. And so if you play aggressive armies and you're good at doing that, you're going to be able to do that very consistently. Purge the Foe, also relatively consistent unless your opponent can build around it, and building around Purge the Foe is certainly possible in a teams format. You can make your army very difficult to kill, you can make your army very low unit count, and you can make it very difficult to consistently kill primaries. However, in the team format, it is like, I think the kind of like most brain dead to score. It requires the least work on your part, because it's just about attacking your opponent, right? So if you're playing like 40k at the fundamental level, you don't have to do very much besides just kill things in most cases, in most of your primary missions. So it's very straightforward. And the other thing is that it doesn't require a lot of action, so you can play more aggressive armies and play Purge the Foe. And then you can use the pairing process to dodge any of the armies that might be built to play against Purge the Foe. And then the interesting one is priority assets. This is the one that's the biggest blind spot for me, because I haven't played it yet, personally. But I have heard from people that they feel like priority assets is actually maybe the most consistent at scoring. It's not the most consistent in terms of the like how straightforward its missions are. Take and Hold is literally like go to the middle of the table, get points. Whereas priority assets requires a lot of actions. It requires a lot of like specific activations. However, I have heard from people that they feel like it is probably the highest scoring, like the biggest upside variety of force disposition. So I've seen a lot of people starting to go out of their way to play priority assets. I'd be interested to see how that ends up, developing as people get more used to the different missions. But it's definitely fascinating situation. Which disposition seems to counter Purge the Foe the best? Been having luck with Recon. That's interesting. I was sort of under the impression that Recon was a big that Purge was a big weakness for Recon. I guess we can like take just a peek at the missions real quick here. Like the reason being that like Consecrate feels extremely strong. Maybe just the strongest like primary mission. And that is the one you get against Recon as Purge. The one that I think the prevailing wisdom right now is that Disruption is actually kind of awkward for Purge. The Disruption primary is pretty straightforward, but you can manipulate it, and especially in the early game, it requires that the units they have to kill have to be ones that have done specific things. They have to destroy enemy units, or they have to be on objective markers, and you don't get any duplicate points for killing them, right? So if you kill one, and then that's it. And so as the Disruption player, you can actually play around that quite a bit. So that has felt like to me to be the like most manipulable of the Purge missions, in my opinion. But that is just from my limited experience so far. I'm only about 15 games into the edition so far, so I haven't played all of the different. I don't have like a ton of experience playing all of the different disposition matchups. I should say. So that's how I feel about it anyway. But I don't know if necessarily the community agrees with me on that. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Does it have to be super aggressive versus Recon? I mean, I guess that's interesting. I guess the other question is like, is Recon's Purge mission good at all? It's triangulation. You get points for. I guess I can't see. Oh, we can flip the card here. Performing an action, and you can triangulate objectives, and then you score permanently on them, it looks like. And then you get a big bonus at the end of the battle. But I guess like the thing is that a lot of times you're going to be able to, like, because the Recon player has to play relatively aggro, they then give up like consecration targets to the purge player, and so you end up sort of trading points. But purge doesn't require you perform any actions, so it's basically just like it's hanging out and essentially just like playing a normal game and getting 6 victory points like per turn, plus its regular hold points as well. So I don't know, we'll see. Yeah, so the difference is that like purge can score points off of killing the guys who are doing triangulation, and they basically give you consecration targets by going to do triangulation. So I don't know. Maybe it's fine. It is interesting. I haven't played that matchup yet, so I don't know exactly how well it would go. It would be cool if that ended up being a counter, because Recon I think is my favorite disposition to play so far. It's just like it's pretty cool. It's very maneuver focused. I think it's fun. I like having to pay attention to exactly where your models are positioned. I played Disruption for a really long time. This past week, I played 1 million games of Disruption, and I was getting a little frustrated by some of the repeat actions that you're requested to do, which is very difficult. Anyway, chat, I think we should talk about some lists. How are we feeling about lists? So let's talk about Team Nemesis here. We can go down the line, I suppose, and talk about exactly what is doing well. It looks like Glenisier rocking a relatively classic Mont-Ka. Not too much shocking here. I think what I'm going to do actually is... Give me one moment, chat. I apologize. I'm going to expand my view here a little bit so it's not off. It's not going off of the screen. Okay, much better. Cool. There we go. Now it's not cut off. So running Twin Lance, Dark Strider for the backline support. The 12-inch no deep strike zone is incredibly important to prevent a lot of the missions that require that you take your opponent's home objective. There's a lot of those. The one that always gets me, or has gotten me a bunch of times so far, is Forward Positions, which is a secondary mission that says either take your opponent's home or take both expansions. Taking both expansions is often very difficult, but if you don't have appropriate screening in the back, you sometimes can set up like a 2-turn play to take their home. And while, especially with Purge, taking the home doesn't matter so much, that like take and hold is the one that really wants to protect their home objective. But Purge the Foe doesn't really care so much. So sometimes if you're playing a more aggressive like build for Purge the Foe, you will be you're incentivized to like push off of the home and just leave it alone. And then you start bleeding points to those secondaries. And having Darkstrider back there is this little 60-point goober who can just project that no deep strike aura. Makes that way more difficult. We have an Ethereal with Strike Swiftly, so he's a caddy for the scout enhancement, and then he also generates you command points over the course of the game. I think command point generators, I talked about this in my video this morning, but I think I'm getting the impression that command point generators are dramatically more important in 11th edition than they were in 10th. The sole reason for that being that you don't discard tactical secondaries as often. So in some cases, like in 11th edition, you would draw what were dead secondaries in 10th, but you'll just hold on to them for 2+ turns and just, sort of generate value with them later, hold them for later value. And I've even seen some games where like you draw a secondary turn 1 and then you hold it for the entire game. So the fact that you aren't discarding almost any secondaries anymore means that you aren't competing with your other command point generation. So I think units like Ethereals, units like, Marnius Calgar, Swarmlord, Azrael, all these guys who will give you passive command point generation are going to be way more powerful. We have a Crisis Star Scythe Battlesuit team because they're super cheap. See, if you take the Burst Cannon variety, they're only 90 points for 15 wounds, the 4+ invuln, which is, or 15 wounds. I guess they don't have a 4+ invuln because they don't have shield generators, but they have shield drones for the additional wound. But they're T5. They're better than almost all other utility units in the game, and they pack enough burst cannon fire that they can kill other utility units. So they're a very good skirmisher. We have Pathfinder teams ×3 for early game stuff. I think basically you always take a grab inhibitor on these guys, but we took one recon drone, so we have one infiltrate unit. Obviously loses the scout if they choose to do the infiltrate, though. But otherwise, we're taking grab inhibitors. We then have Piranha, 3 broadside battlesuits. These guys looks like are equipped with high-yield missile pods. 2 Riptide battlesuits with ion accelerators. A Stormsurge, let's go. +2 stealth battlesuits. I'm interested in the Stormsurge. He was taken in team events in 10th edition because he had the towering keyword. However, you don't need the towering keyword to see through terrain anymore. So I'm curious about this guy in this build. Let me pull up his datasheet real quick here. I don't know if there's like a particular sort of defensive profile that we're trying to answer with that guy. We are bringing the Pulse Blast Cannon on him. So either the 6 shots at 4 damage or 2 shots at 12. At strength 24, let's go. I do think there is something to be said for answering land raiders. I have seen that there is like a resurgence of heavy vehicles, not in the same numbers as we saw them in 10th edition for sure. And they don't have the same level of defensive stacking, but being able to very cleanly kill those things is important. And then the heavy keyword actually makes this guy pretty consistent. He can get to what is effectively a 2+ ballistic scale pretty easily because you get +1 BS from guiding, ignore cover, and then +1 to hit from heavy. So you can go down to hitting on 2s. So I guess that's probably the reason. It's just like the fact that he is such a consistent damage dealer. 4 flat damage is also very important for a couple different things. We've seen things like there's been a resurgence of like Sekitar robots is a big one, being able to kill the entire unit relatively pretty freely, right? With just the 1 disperse shot is nice, and also like melee Terminators, Terminator Assault Squads, with Storm Shields, put out massive numbers of 4 wound models, so having a flat 4 damage weapon, in addition to your Riptide battlesuits, obviously, helps that out quite a bit. So I think that the 4 damage is actually a relevant stat these days. It also gives you, like, some interesting activations into stuff like, Scarab Cult Terminators, where they can't sink 2 shots into their Sorcerer, they take only 1, and then they die. So I definitely understand it. I get it for sure. Cool. All right. Well, there's Tau Empire. It is mod cost stuff, which I guess is not too surprising. But we have been seeing a lot of people move away from mod COD just because the aggro plays are a little bit more difficult these days. But if you can set your defender early and then choose your layout, it's a lot easier to get layouts that are conducive to like the mass Pathfinders that you're bringing in that list, or to set up your observing a little bit more aggressively. One downside I think right now of Tau is that because a lot of stuff is untargetable outside of a certain distance, not simply is invisible outside of a certain distance, not untargetable outside of a certain distance. There is a downside for spotting mechanics where your stealth battlesuits and stuff actually physically can't see the targets that they want to spot into. So your like alpha strikes on turn 1 are really inconsistent unless your Pathfinders are getting up like way up close and personal. And then sometimes you're overextending and things go poorly. But if you can choose a terrain layout where you can set up those observations where it's not quite as damaging for you, I think that they look really, really good. All right. Let's talk about some Emperor's Children. We have a bit of an interesting one here. So Jack Murphy playing a combination of Frenzied Host with Carnival of Excess. So Frenzied Host is the battle line detachment for Emperor's Children now. It's the 1 DP detachment that gives you +1 strength when you are selected to make an advance or fallback move on all your weapons if you are battle line keyworded. So it affects your Lord's Exultant and makes those Lord's Exultant super duper just the infractor squads in general are just very efficient. We're also comboing that with Carnival of Excess, which is the demon detachment. So it gives you access to sustained hits basically Oh, hello. That's not what I was looking for. It gives you access to... here we go. Sustained hits 1, basically when a demon and an Emperor's Children unit are next to each other. So it's a little bit... It's more broad range than just picking like a Peerless Bladesman, which can get that only on the charge and only on your Emperor's Children units. This one gives you access to demons and can affect your guns as well. And in this case, we're playing Lord Exultant plus Infractors with a Possessed Blade, which is +1 attack characteristic on 1 melee weapon. He can gain Devastating Wounds and Hazardous, and because he's attached to Infractors, he can gain wound rerolls, so Devastating Wounds is incredibly effective. Hazardous is not really that big of a deal these days, so being able to generate that is pretty cool. Also, he goes to 3 damage, which is massive, so that guy hits like an absolute truck. That seems really good. It is good that it is select 1 melee weapon equipped by the bearer, and not all melee weapons, because it would then affect his whip, because we did lose the rider on extra attacks that you can't be modified the attack characteristic. That's gone. We have another Lord Exalted with Dark Blessings. That's a 3+ invulnerable save once per game. So you can use that as the end of the allocation step, so the Infractors can take all your low saves, and then the Lord Exalted just auto passes for an entire phase, basically, or at least 1 entire activation, and potentially gets 2 activations out of him. A singleton Lord Exaltant with no friends is not quite as powerful, especially if he's already used his once per game. However, he's still good. He still gets like the 4 Rapture Lash attacks plus his own spear attack. So he's good for killing 5 Space Marines basically relatively consistently, even if his unit's dead. He'll also gain his lethal hits now, even if his unit's dead as well, which is a big deal. He loses the rerolls from the Infractors once they're destroyed, but as soon as he attaches at the start of the game, he does get the lethal hits baseline. We then have 1,000,000 Demonettes for 90 points, just a bunch of, I guess they're not OC2, but they are relatively quick infantry, so that's pretty helpful. A Tormentor Squad for OBSEC, double Chaos Rhinos, double Defilers. And here's, I think, where the purpose for taking Carnival of Excess is. Not only do we get a bunch of utility, which is very helpful, but also we're able to provide sustained hits to the Defilers themselves. They're taking heavy Reaper autocannons, which I believe, if I remember correctly, already have sustained hits built in. And so they gain critical 5 sustains when they're near a demon. That's the other part of there you go. That's the other part of the detachment ability. And these guys are really good at sweeping sort of heavy infantry, right? 3-wound infantry bricks are just going to get pulverized by them. They have so many 2 and 3 damage shots that they'll push through a lot of those 3-wound defensive profiles really quickly, and then they have enough attacks that they are going to be able to plink damage into bigger stuff that they'll kill them eventually too. So seems pretty good. Hitting on 2s or maybe 3s in some cases with critical 5 sustained hits, meaning that you're averaging around the same number of attacks as you started with, if not more, every time you go to shoot that guy, which is massive. We then have a Flawless Blade squad for some late game anchor, +2 Noise Marine squads. These guys also, of course, get the sustained hits when you're running 1,000,000 Demonettes around. So just a lot of highly consistent shooting that's backed up by the Infractors, which are going to be doing some pretty serious damage. The nice thing here, too, is that you don't necessarily need to play the Lord Exultant units too aggressively. That's obviously the big difference when you don't play Coterie of the Conceited, is that the Lord of Exultants can just like hide in a Rhino or hide in a hidden terrain feature for most of the game, and then come in the late game as your opponent is taking midboard objectives. Whereas in something like Coterie, there's a time pressure on you to use those units to benefit the rest of the units with the pact buffs or the pledge points, and you don't have to do that in this attachment. They're just getting their sustains and they're just getting their +1 strength permanently for the whole game. So you can actually play the range game a little bit more effectively, and you can use the Demonettes to like deep strike, like rapid ingress into a hidden position, move, charge with +1 thanks to the demonic icon, and steal objectives away from people. So I don't know, that seems pretty cool. I like it. All right. Let's go over to the next one. It's nice to see non-Coterie of the Conceited Emperor's Children, because I I was a little worried that we were just becoming the coterie of the conceited, like, monoliths, which is, not ideal. All right. Let's talk about this is gonna be a little bit confusing. But we'll do it anyway. Jeffrey Kolodner's also here running Hallowed Martyrs. So, I think he's noted his attachments in the top of the list and not in the list, which is a little confusing. So it's Hallowed Martyrs, and I think a lot of times we're sort of pushing towards Hallowed Martyrs in order to be more of a melee army, as opposed to playing a lot of the like ranged combos that you used to play with like high individual damage ranged attacks for sisters, because they don't necessarily have the miracle dice economy to quite do that. However, you are able to play really aggressively with Hallowed Martyrs, and you get benefits when your dudes die. Although, I guess this list is bringing enough stuff that we can probably generate some miracle dice early. A nice thing about taking things like the individual mortifiers, for example, is that they're individually pretty damaging, so you have to kill them, which means you generate miracle dice for the rest of the army. They don't have the same problem as an army that's playing like jump canonesses, for example, that don't generate multiple miracle dice anymore. They generate one. However, you do still get the Saintly Example combo. That really hasn't changed. So being able to Saintly Example into Divine Intervention into Saintly Example again, meaning that the Canoness can generate 2d3 plus 2 miracle dice, is pretty cool. So let's see. We've got Saint Celestine in a Zephyrim squad. Saint Celestine, I think, probably pretty useful now because she's able to constantly regenerate models back to her unit, even if her Zephyrim are dead, which was not something that she could do previously. So you can play a little bit sort of more frivolously with the bodyguards themselves. We have Morven Vol. Morven lost an N in her name somewhere with the Paragon Warsuit unit. The Paragon Warsuits are bringing Heavy Bolters. Oh, it looks like we're bringing a combination. That's interesting. So it's probably one multi-melta Paragon just to use to give the opportunity to use Miracle Dice. There's also probably some logistical concerns with using multiple multi-meltas, which is that you then have to you didn't have to like split your allocation or your attack groups, because oftentimes not all of them are in Melta range, so it makes the unit a little bit weirder to use. Using one multi-Melta just gives you a really good outlet for any like damage or wound miracle dice that you'd want to use, and you can do that pretty consistently because Morphin Vol gives you rerolls on the hit and the wound roll, so you can roll and see what you get and then choose to reroll and pick up the miracle dice from there. We then have the Heavy Bolters, which are very good because they don't care so much about -1 to hit from cover. Either you're stripping it with an Immolator, or you are just rerolling anyway and getting sustained and then pushing through full hit and wound reroll onto sort of base armor saves with -1 AP. So we've seen a lot of push in this faction in general towards Heavy Bolters, just because of the fact that they now basically don't suffer the equivalent of -1 AP from cover. That's kind of interesting. We then have Junith in a Battle Sister squad, a Palatine in Celestian Incendant squad. Now, the Incendants are interesting. I think they've been they've really gotten a lot more popular in this new edition. Big thing is that they have a Feel No Pain against psychic attacks and mortal wounds. So there's a lot more mortal wound generation in this edition. You're talking about like explosives in a lot more units and crushing impact in a lot more units. Just in general, gives you a lot of additional mortal wounds you didn't have previously. But we also see factions like Tyranids and Thousand Suns being sort of at the upper echelon of the game, means that having anti-psychic protection is really important. So these guys don't necessarily just die to a bunch of like psychic blast weapons or smites or something from a Rubric Marine squad or whatever. The other thing is that they also have anti-psyker attacks. Either they're taking Condemned bolt pistols, or they have their Null maces, which is anti-psyker 4+ devastating. So the unit can rock in and probably hit for, I don't know, like 12 to 15 mortal wounds in a lot of cases if you get a little lucky, and maybe you can apply some of the reroll strats that you get access to in Hallowed Martyrs as well. And if you're taking any casualties on the way in order to clear out those units, so things like Lords of Change and stuff are going to do some pretty serious damage.
Grimaldus donated $2 through Super Chat. Any Templars placements?
I don't know if anybody's playing Black Templars in teams. Right now we're looking really at the sort of top placing teams. There is a Black Templars, but I don't know how well they did. The answer was, I think, not very well, unfortunately. So in teams specifically, I don't think a lot of people are rocking Black Templars, but I don't know necessarily how they did in singles events. We're going to be talking about singles events tomorrow, so that's where we're talking about X and 1s and stuff. They didn't get any event wins. We saw Iron Hands, we saw Dark Angels do well, but we'll see how they did in like X and 1s and stuff tomorrow. It's a little tough for teams because that eats your Space Marine slot, so you lose access to Salamanders and Ultramarines and like Iron Hands, all the other Space Marine sub-factions that are also pretty good. Yeah, and then this list just has a bunch of guns in the back line. We have Dominions to fill up our Immolator. We've got one Immolator, one Castigator, double Mortifiers. These guys also have heavy bolters, which is helpful. Or excuse me, triple Mortifiers, not double. So they all have heavy bolters for the reasons we talked about previously. One Exorcist, as well as a Zephyrim unit. Neat. So I guess this isn't quite as sort of aggressive and melee oriented as I expected to see. We did see like Celestian Sacrosanct Hallowed Martyrs do well over the weekend, but it seems good. Yeah, there is some new stuff in teams, but it's mostly, I think it's stuff that was like largely already good or is independently good, and then just has a couple of modifications for teams. I don't know if people are like going out of their way to take like weird and wacky stuff. Josh Campbell also ran Necrons. This is a little bit weird because I don't know how these guys ended up working in at ATC. The problem with Necrons right now, and especially Awakened Dynasty, is that there is an FAQ in the tournament pack that says that once a bodyguard unit is destroyed and only the leader's left, you cannot reanimate bodyguard models. But a lot of people just chose to ignore that, which is kind of blows my mind. I don't know necessarily if that was the case for ATC. I guess like, can we see their like FAQ packet? Player packet is here. ATC is here. I don't know if they have like an FAQ document in here or something. Blah 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 blah. It doesn't seem like they do. So get wrecked, I guess. RIP. So that like dramatically changes how especially Awakened Dynasty works, because it lets you do this very degenerate thing where you can lose your unit and all its attached characters, and then use Resurrection or Resurrection Protocol to or Protocol of the Eternal Revenant, excuse me, to bring back the character who then reanimates the attached unit, which is like, I don't know, feels unintended. But that definitely changes how you view Awakened Dynasty as a detachment in general. They did ignore it at ATC. Yeah. All right. Well, something team events, chats. That is explicitly prevented by the faction pack, but I don't know. People just want Necrons to be good, I guess. Who can blame them? We need our resident Egyptian spacemen to be strong, I suppose. It's worse than Eldar at the start of 10th. That cannot be true. I will say that sounds degenerate and stupid, and I think it's both it's both prevented by the intended and written rules. So I don't really understand why anyone is ruling the other way by it. However, I do not think it's worse than the 10th edition Eldar. That cannot be the case. But that does mean, I don't know. This is just, if that is the case, then this is kind of like an irrelevant result here, to be honest. I don't know necessarily if that interaction doesn't exist, if you push so hard for this style of unit in Awakened. This style of army, because it's a lot of MSU with individual characters, right? So it's a Technomancer with Wraiths, it's a Locust Lord with Locust Heavy Destroyers, it's an Overlord with Necron Warriors, it's a Scorpic Lord with Scorpic Destroyers × 2. So any of these individual characters can be used as like this little one-shot weapon that you go in, you blow something up, you get killed, you regenerate the unit, and then you do it again. And if that is the play pattern, then I would question how long that's going to survive, to be perfectly honest, because I don't think that there's any way in hell that makes it through another round of FAQs. People forgot how the start of 10th edition was. Yeah, it was fucking wild, dude. Eldar, I think, were in some matchups, assuming that your opponent wasn't like, sort of actually brain damaged. I think Eldar were in some cases literally unbeatable. Like, it wasn't just a thing where they were like advantaged to the point that it was very difficult. It was like in a very literal case, you could not defeat them in most cases. That wasn't obviously 100% true. They didn't have a 100% win rate. You could make mistakes or run into another faction that was pretty well suited, but in a lot of cases, it was just like absolutely nuts. Stream game with Folger playing Necrons of the Knights. Yeah, that's honestly, I don't know. That's like so flabbergasting of a ruling, to be honest. That you would choose to ignore the faction pack FAQ. Whereas in some other cases, I know that ATC did rule that the faction pack, superseded previous rules. So it's weird that they would choose in one case to do one thing and in another case to do something else. It's like inconsistent. I don't like that very much. It'll be the next data slate. Yeah, it should already have been a data slate. The problem is that the FAQ is worded in a weird way, and it's an FAQ that carried over from 10th edition, so people assume that it's a typo, which is why people ignore it. But if you read it at its most literal, it says that you can't affect a unit that has no bodyguard models remaining with reanimation protocols, which means you wouldn't be able to heal them, which feels very cleanly to stopgap the issue where you can regenerate a whole unit after bringing back a model with resurrection protocols. You can, to be fair, lose the character to precision, for example, and then reanimate them back. Nothing stops that from happening. But as soon as you lose all your bodyguard models, you can then only affect the character with reanimation protocols. And it's very explicit. I really don't understand, chat. But an army rule is not a rule? Yeah, whatever, dude. Yeah. The thing is that it says any rule that activates reanimation protocols doesn't trigger on the bodyguard models. And if you read reanimation protocols, it says in your command phase, this model's reanimation protocols activate. Which means the reanimation protocols rule is a rule that activates reanimation protocols in your command phase. So in no cases is that model being affected. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's fucking wild, dude. I straight up don't understand. But it is what it is, chat. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about some Chaos Demons. So Justin Serrano was playing Chaos Demons with the combination of Scintillating Legion and Lords of the Warp. I do like this combination, by the way. I was playing around with some Scintillating Legion builds. There's a funny thing you can do with Lords of the Warp because it can affect your like Exalted Flamers. If you want to spend the points on it, you can take a bunch of 8-wound Exalted Flamers that run around as independent characters. And they're, I think, 85 points. And I was like, that's kind of neat. I don't know if that's good, but it's certainly interesting. Just as little individual utility. But in some cases, I do think that you do want to take individual, like, sort of utility characters in this detachment, because a lot of your points are being bound up in Lords of Change, and you don't necessarily want to put all of your support enhancements on the Lords of Change themselves. Now, what's interesting about this is that we are not taking the Inescapable Eye on anything in this list, so we don't have access to additional Flux token generation. The Flux tokens we're just using the baseline Scintillating Legion Flux token. I think it's just like once if your opponent is holding onto Flux tokens, which can mean that you can sort of stumble on your if your opponent is holding one or more Flux tokens, you gain one Flux token. You can ensure that they do hold one Flux token at the end of their turn by using the up-down strat. It does require that you use the up-down strat consistently. Basically, there is a stratagem in the detachment called Delirium Unmade, which picks up your units, but you can spend a Flux token to enhance it. That happens at the end of your opponent's turn, so you can do that, automatically give them a Flux token, and then ensure that you generate one additional Flux token the next turn, so there's another Flux token in the economy there. However, it does require you a command point to do that. It requires that you hold a Flux token throughout the entire turn to do that, which means that you're limited on your rerolls, and you're limited on your activations for things like Pyrogenesis. So there is it is a little bit tough to, I think, it's much less of a consistent economy without Inescapable Eye, which basically just doubles the number of Flux tokens that you generate from having your opponent having them. So you're actually netting Flux tokens by using the end of game up-down rather than just spending them. So I don't know. It is what it is. You do have to, I think, what you want to do typically is put that enhancement on a little guy who's going to like hold your backline or something, though. So it does require that you do spend a relatively significant investment to do that. Not to say that independent like Tzeentch characters are not good, because they are pretty good. It is an expense, though. You just need to social engineer your opponent into using Flux tokens. That's true. Yeah. I mean, sometimes they will. Basically, if it's like a situation where they could convert in and kill a Lord of Change, they'll probably do it. But in doing so, they give you savory rolls. The Flux token mechanic's very interesting. I think generally speaking, what you're supposed to do as the player playing against Scintillating Legion is to only use Flux tokens in a position where they would dramatically change the game state. So, like, I could use them to reroll saves on a unit, and if that unit lives, I score a billion points, right? I'm scoring like a full round action plus a hold plus deny your secondary or whatever. That's a situation where you might spend it. Or if you're like, I'm in a situation where a Lord of Change is on 1 and I can confirm I kill it, that's always like important too. But in most other cases, you hold the Flux tokens until like Battle Round 5, where you just burn through all of them, especially if you're going second and your opponent won't get the opportunity to spend them like offensively into you. You just burn through all the Flux tokens immediately. Unless you're giving your opponent savory rolls that are relevant, you just like spend them willy-nilly, and you hold them for the entire game so your opponent doesn't get to use them. That's I think that's generally how you're supposed to play against it, but it is weird. I do think this detachment's very strong, though. You get psychic weapons, you get anti-heavy infantry, especially because everything's like a strength 10 plus AP 2 3 damage gunshot. So if you're playing against something that's like mass Terminators or like, mass these like 3 wound profiles, these guys will just rock up and kill all of them. The downside, of course, is that it's much more difficult to get shots on people, to like get the weird angle shots onto things that you did in previous editions. So in 10th edition, sometimes what you could do is like up down your Lord of Change and then peek a shot into a unit in a position where a limited number of things can come back and attack you. And that's because the combat distances are so much closer. It's much more difficult to do that in 11th edition, because you have to be probably within 12 inches of a target if it's like a utility unit in order to attack them, because most likely they're gone to ground. And at that point, your opponent likely has the movement to move back into Bellicors 18-inch slowing up aura to shoot you on the crackback. However, you do have so many Lords of Change that it might not matter. This list is running 5 Greater Demons, a man after my own heart. 1 Infernal Puppeteer guy, so we can measure range and line of sight from other dudes in the army, which is helpful. We have an Improbable Shield guy, who is phenomenal, by the way. Absolutely incredible.
Etzel Spartan donated $2 through Super Chat. Check out the Necron list on Midwest Monstars.
If it's a Midwest Monstars Necron list, I guarantee you it's Corey playing it, right? Yeah, it is. And it has at least 1 Tesseract Arcade or Tesseract Vault in it. I don't know why it does this thing, and it loses where I was. We can do that after we go through the Nemesis list for sure. Improbable Shield is incredibly strong because it gives you a feel no pain against psychic attacks and mortal wounds again, but it does it as a big aura. So you just put your brick in range of that dude, and then your army is significantly harder to interact with for a lot of factions. So like Tyranids and Thousand Suns, for example, just get fucking boned by this enhancement. It is a 30-point enhancement, but I think it's worth every penny. Even just having an anti-mortal wound thing can muck with a lot of aggressive or sort of other offensive strats. So if you have things like the Librarius Conclave, like Fusillade combo, the anti-monster devastating wound Sternguard veteran unit that has full rerolls, that ends up dealing all of its damage in mortal wounds, so you just get a 4+ feel no pain against it. So this guy can protect you against that. He can also protect you against the other devastating wound stuff that Salamanders can do. So there's some Space Marine things that this guy stops. It's a lot. It's a lot that he does for 30 points, and especially in a team format where you can angle yourself into those matchups into a position where it's really, really difficult for them to engage you in any meaningful way. It seems very, very strong. It actually makes like the Sekitar robots, for example, like actively bad against you because it makes all of their guns psychic. And even in a position where you wouldn't be gaining any benefit from psychic, it does give you the downside, which is, I don't know, pretty strong. It gives you the downside largely because you can put all of their available targets into the aura. It's not just a single unit that they can choose not to shoot at. You can make it so that everything they shoot at's inside of it. It doesn't affect Bellicor or the other keywords, obviously, but it's still very good. We then have a Poxbringer for some utility. He gets +1 OC from Lords of the Warp, which is adorable. We love that. And then utility and 2 units of Screamers and 2 units of Flamers. Now, the big thing, too, is that Lords of the Warp unlocks Purge the Foe from you. I believe that priority assets is the original disposition for Scintillating Legion. So being able to access Purge the Foe and have very limited requirement on the Lords of Change to do anything besides just constantly shoot people is massive. And I guess it's worth mentioning too while I'm talking about these guys constantly shooting people is that the Improbable Shield also works on hazardous checks, which are twice as likely to fail now, right? So hazardous on a big multi-wound demon like these guys is very dangerous. Improbable Shield does basically put it back to being like almost normal, or the 10th edition amount of damage you would expect. So it just massive attrition engine. big stompy demons that are hard to kill and hit super hard. They don't care about cover at all. They hit on 2s. Sometimes they reroll 1s thanks to Bellicor. They have sustained D3 all the time. It just gets really disgusting. And I think it's great. I don't know. They love that. Proxbringer also has about -1 to battle shock texture. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's okay. I think he's mostly there because he had the Poxbringer as opposed to the Bile Piper has a feel no pain, and he hits okay in melee. So having like a little OC2 dude who can sometimes survive crackbacks is kind of nice. Unfortunate that he doesn't get this ability permanently. I think that would be cool, but he does still have a lethal hit 2 damage melee weapon, so he can sometimes do some damage, and then he's also just like randomly will survive if you send a couple of guys into him to try to kill him. T5 with a 5+ feel no pain and a 5+ invuln is like it's not the hardest thing in the world to kill, but he does require a little bit of work to try to get through. All right. Come over to Nemo. Old Nemo the fish back at his old tricks on Recon Element. Seems still good despite the fact that everything went up in points. I'm curious, actually. If we look at our pairings, did Nemo drop any differential? Player placing. That's the real test of whether or not Recon Element is still super strong. He did, chat. He did. As his games got more difficult, he actually dropped differential. The problem with this list in previous incarnations is that Nemo would go through entire events, literally dropping like a sub 1 point, like sub 5 points across the entire event in terms of differential. Not even talking about actual victory points, but those are just the points where he was able to basically score 100 to keep his opponent below 50. It was almost impossible for him to lose differential points in the previous edition. Now it looks like he's got to try a little bit harder. So maybe Recon Element's actually trash. God, he sucks now. So how far the mighty have fallen? I can't believe I could never imagine only winning 14-6 instead of 20-0. That's crazy. There is some weirdness with Recon Element. Somebody brought this up to me, which is really interesting. Is that it does have this effect by which, while you are benefiting from cover, you get a save characteristic improvement. However, we talk about many things ignoring cover that don't actually ignore cover. They ignore the effect of cover, but they don't actually have ignores cover. So things like psychic weapons, things like torrent weapons, for example, none of those care about -1 ballistic skill from cover. However, you are still technically in cover. You are imposing that penalty on the attack, despite the fact that it is being ignored by some other mechanic. Now, the reason that is important is
Ebriong 6931 donated $5 through Super Chat. Did you see the thing about Squighogs having mobile BTW?
I didn't. I don't know about that. What's the thing about Squighogs having mobile? So even if you have an effect that ignores the ballistic skill characteristic modifier, the save characteristic improvement will still apply. So if I, for example, have a Kidian command squad that's like issuing an order, so he gives the unit cover and they gain double cover, which gives them +1 save, then they're still going to get the +1 save, even if you shoot them with like a torrent. Now, that means that in many cases, it is relevant for weapons to have ignore cover, even if they already would technically ignore cover through some other mechanic, because it means you get to ignore this effect. So, but what's interesting about that is that like it then cares whether or not your particular torrent weapon has the ignore cover keyword on it, which is wild. So I think in some cases you could look into armies that would be like, oh, I'm good against this, right? You get the cover bonus and I have all psychic or whatever. But they're like, no. I'm still going to be like basically a 3+ save guardsman infantry because I'm going to get +1 save and I'm going to get the take cover order. So I'm still getting a bunch of defensive defensive benefits despite the fact that I am, you are like nominally ignoring a lot of what I have. Mobile's on their data sheet since 11th. Was that in their faction pack? I'm actually interested. If so, I totally missed that. That is much better for them. I'm still curious about how you get like 9-man models into engagement with big bases. I think that's very difficult. But I imagine that part of the use case is that you're gonna be like slingshotting them around. That would be in erratas. It's Squighog Boyz. I don't know. Is it Squig? It's not Squighog, right? Two separate things? No. I don't know, chat. It looks like they just changed their tank bus's ability.
Ebriong 6931 donated $2 through Super Chat. That's why they were in your best armies list.
Yeah, that's weird because they don't change they don't add it to their datasheet in the change list here. Is there a change list thing in the Orks thing? No. Oh well. Interesting. It's like always funny when stuff like that happens and it's in one thing. It's in one document, but not another. It's an ability? Hold up, chat. What is this about them having mobile? Am I stupid? No. I don't think they have mobile. Mounted Beast Snagger Grenade Squighog. Yeah, I don't think they have mobile, chat. I'm not sure what you're on about. Do they get it from like the Beast Boss? No, they don't. They do not have mobile. I don't know what we were talking about. I don't. It's not in the faction pack and it's not on the app, so I don't know. I don't know where we're coming from with that. Anyway, let's move on and talk about Recon Element. I hope they didn't play it with mobile. that would be a controversy. Yikes. All right, we're talking about Imperial Guard though. Imperial Guard time. So we got Command Squad, Inacadian Shock Trooper Squad, Militarum Tempestus, and a Tempestus Scion Squad. These guys are actually interesting. If you can put them into cover, then they get just a baseline 3+ save without having to get the bonus save from the order at all. We do have a Command Rod on the Tempestus, on the Tempester Prime, so we can give them all of the offensive buffs too. But I think despite the fact that Tempestus Scions got a points increase, they still seem pretty strong. 2 units of Tempestus Scions for that reason. Gaunt's Ghosts. Lord Marshal Dreyer is in this list. I wonder if that is entirely so that we can bring him out of reserve and then issue 1 trillion orders. Dreyer, by the way, has crazy order economy. He just is so... He's like... His actual datasheet doesn't do anything besides issue orders. So he has 3 regiment orders that he can issue, but like it's just on this like T4 like goober who you don't really want to be playing with. Now, fortunately, he's 75 points. The downside, of course, is that he is mounted, so he doesn't get hidden. So you have to actually be careful about where he goes. But he does issue 1 trillion orders, so that's pretty good. We have an Ogryn Bodyguard and Ursula Creed. The Ogryn Bodyguard is interesting because I don't think that any of his abilities changed. So I think that he still joins in Declare Battle Formation step rather than in when you construct your army. I had this discussion about like Tomb Crawlers earlier, and I wasn't sure when Tomb Crawlers declared whether or not they were inside a unit. And I imagine the case is that you still do it in Declare Battle Formations. Not that it makes a lick of difference, because you always know where your units are going to go, but it is interesting that you could potentially get to choose on explicitly units that join other units, not characters that lead other units. We also have independent Ursula Creed for some free stratagems. Nice thing for there is that, like I was mentioning before, independent characters can hide in terrain now. So being able to take these units without having to take them in a big giant unit is really, really helpful. Because now you don't have Ursula Creed like running up alongside a guardsman unit with the potential that she does get killed. She could just sit in the back and issue free strats all day, which is nice. We have an unattached Death Corps of Krieg unit, Cadian Recon. Several instances of Cadian Recon. That's fascinating. I'm interested in that. They do have like a little thing. They have their Vox Relay, right? To start the battle, you can set a Vox Relay beacon token for this unit anywhere on the battlefield that is not in your opponent's deployment zone. When the friendly Astra Militarum regiment unit that is within 6 inches of that token, officer units from your army can issue orders to that regiment unit, as if the officer was within 6 inches of it. And then you can destroy them by getting within an inch. So I guess that's fascinating because it does mean that both Lord Marshal Dryer and Ursula Creed can potentially issue orders with like a pseudo Master Vox without having to attach into a unit. So they're not in danger. They can hide in the back and they can like screen your deployment zone or provide their auras and stuff wherever you need them to. And then they just can provide order support through the Vox Relay Beacon. And you get 6 orders from those two combined. So as long as you can chain your units to within 6 inches of these 2 locations, right? Because we have 2 recon teams. You're going to be able to issue orders to the entire army without having to rely on any other character support, which is actually super cool. That's neat. That's super duper neat. We have 3 Cadian and Catachin heavy weapon squads with las cannons, probably using the new heavy rule to get +1 to hit more consistently, so they can like hide in or behind terrain and then peek into the terrain and start firing at people, which is nice. That's very cool. I like that. It seems like I think that the new heavy mechanics have really, really changed how you look at heavy units. I talked about this momentarily yesterday for the DACA rig, which I don't know why. I want to just look at the keyword. Which I think I had originally kind of laughed at because I just assumed that in most cases it would be hitting on 6s, but it's mostly hitting on 5s because of this heavy keyword. You just tow behind terrain, you sit behind terrain 1 millimeter off, and then you just poke into the terrain and you hit on baseline 4s. If you're shooting into cover, you go to 5s, but you shoot 20 shots with that unit, and these guys are firing 3 las cannon shots that are probably hitting on, somewhere around 4s almost at worse in that case, which means it's like, and, not to mention the fact that at that point, you're not, getting the -1 AP from cover either. So these las cannons are pushing a lot of things on 5 or 6s to save. So any converted las cannon shot into somebody is really valuable, and you're only spending 65 points and maybe an order for that. Which seems really good. I think this change was massively positive for a lot of this style of unit. Not to mention the fact that if you don't have any targets, you just get to go to ground, right? And hang out for a while like that. It's annoyingly obnoxious with scourges. Yeah. We talked about scourges being like absolutely horrific with heavy when the spoiler about it came out, and for sure that's a huge use case for you can remain hidden and then move with heavy and fire and then move behind like the terrain feature you were in, so you like get +1 to hit and your opponent can't deal anything with you is like pretty wild. The other thing too is that take this guys to get on a roof and get plunging fire. I believe, to be clear, I believe that if you move to the top of a roof, you do lose the heavy bonus. Unless the building you're in is like the floor you're on is literally exactly 3 inches. Although I actually don't even know if that works. Let's go back to where we were. If we go back to here, yeah, you can't move more than 3 inches. So it would require that the structure that you're on is exactly 3 inches in height, which I don't think makes any. I don't think that works. Like, I guess that's like conceivable, conceivable, I guess. But realistically, I don't know if that's going to be the case. No. So yeah, that's a common misconception. I have a list of like things that people get wrong all the time, and that might be one of them. Take to the Skies ignores the distance that you move until the end of the movement. Yeah, so it ignores the vertical distance for the purposes of how far it has moved while resolving its move. So it doesn't pay movement for going up, but as soon as the move is resolved, you check its distance from its original position, and that's how far you went, right? So when you choose to take the Skies and you're on the bottom level of a terrain feature, and that terrain feature is, let's say, like 3.1 inches tall, right? Which is pretty likely. which is the requirement to get plunging fire is that the terrain is at least 3 inches, and the requirement for you to get heavy is that you move no more than 3 inches. So the requirement would be that you move literally exactly 3 inches, which I guess in some cases you could say like, well, our terrain is meant to be exactly 3 inches. And if that's the case, then you would get plunging fire. But if your terrain is 3.1 inches tall, for example, you would end up like moving slightly more than it is to get heavy. Yeah. Yeah, I read a very long rules discussion on that interaction a couple weeks ago, and that was the consensus that people came to. So basically, like, I can ignore vertical distance for moving, but I can't ignore vertical distance for any abilities. And I put as much in my FAQ. It could, of course, be that you either rule that your terrain is exactly 3 inches, despite the physical dimensions, or you rule that doesn't work that way, which I don't think is correct, obviously. But I would say, just like erring on the side of caution, I would say that you cannot both gain heavy and plunging fire if you are moving from a bottom level to a top level, because you're either not moving far enough to get plunging fire, or you're moving too far to get heavy, unless you're moving literally no more than 3 inches, which is very difficult. Yeah. So I might do like a rules everybody gets wrong video. I actually have a bunch of bullet points about that, where stuff people... One thing is, like, there's a couple weird ones. One thing is, like, people think that you can't go underneath other models. Just, like, if you have a frame keyworded model, for example, you can't, like, nudge your base underneath it. Nothing in the rule says that. Literally nothing. I don't understand where that take came from. The other one is... people think that you have to move like into base contact with things when you pile in, and you don't have to. You just probably should, because it prevents your opponent from piling in when you do that. But there's no requirement for you to ever go to base contact anymore with anything, which is very cool. Yeah. Neato. Oh, the other thing too is frame keyworded units. This is one that came up the other day. Frame keyword in one of the games I was playing. Frame keyworded models always like rotate from their center mass, regardless of where their base is. So sometimes you have people rotate and they're trying to rotate so that one edge of their model, this is like, so not even here nor there. They would try to rotate so that, like, if their model extends over the base on one side, they rotate it so that like that side gets extra movement, basically. And that is not how you're supposed to work. You're supposed to determine the middle of the center mass of the model and rotate around that point, which could mean that your base actually like shifts around rather than spinning. Which is very rarely relevant, but it is relevant for models that are asymmetric, essentially, on one side or another. There's a bunch of weird little things like that. It's a new edition, so there's like a lot of rules that people are actively learning. Vertus Praetors with spears. So Vertus Praetors are different because they base measure. So if you base measure, you measure from the center of your base, I believe, to my knowledge, because you always use their base for determining your position on the table. But frame models with a base is where it comes up a lot. So like base measurers, because also they don't use their actual miniature for measurement, just for line of sight. Like, it doesn't really matter so much for them anyway. But frame stuff, it's really important. And I've seen some people trying to be like, oh, I rotate them on my base, and that means that like my gun sticking out rotates so that now I like gained 6 inches of movement or something. And you're like, no, not really. You just gain movement because you can go from this position to this position, and that gains you like the lateral distance. But it shouldn't move any part of you further than, you know, any one of these radii, essentially. Oh, wait, Custodian spikes in frame? Is that true? Wait, no. Are you serious? Oh my god, they do. What? All right, well, I take back what I said. It is very relevant for them. That's insane. Why? Chat, why do they have frame? They have a base. They aren't that big. Why do they have frame? That's so bad, actually. What? So, like, whether your dude is modeled with his spear up or his spear forward, like, massively changes how he interacts with the table. That's fucking stupid, dude. That cannot be intended. That must be a typo. Did they gain frame in the faction pack? Here's my thing. If it's not in the faction pack, I don't care about it. Because there's like a bunch of shit where they like added abilities or removed abilities from models where they forgot about it and they like accidentally typoed it. Dude. Like, adding frame to like aircraft and shit is bad enough, but adding frame to like non-vehicle models that already have a fine, like a perfectly normal sized base is fucking absurd. Let's look at this. Let's look at this faction pack. We're gonna get to the bottom of this shit. In the errata section, just at the bottom. Oh my god, there it is. Dawn Eagle, shield captain John Eagle, dead by Vertus Praetors. Add frame. What the fuck, dude? That's absolutely fucking nuts. I hate that. Chad, I hate this game. Why does anybody play this game? It's stupid. God damn it. Can we go play a different game? Can we go play War Machine and Hordes? Where we don't have to worry about this bullshit. Whether or not you're rotating such that your spear doesn't gain extra movement, go fuck yourself. That's very stupid. You have caused me well and truly to crash out, chat. Jesus Christ. All right. Well, anyway, talking about the last the Recon Element guard here. It looks like we also took a bunch of Krieg heavy weapon squads with las cannons, which seems cool. Neato. I guess just taking 18 las cannons that potentially hit on 3s is good. That seems like it's pretty strong. 2 units of Krieg combat engineers and 1 scout sentinel, which actually is interesting because I don't think it's relevant for Bring It Down anymore, right? Because Bring It Down just cares about models with the wounds characteristic of 10. And you could just, as you said, don't have any of those. So the single Scout Sentinel to drop Bring It Down actually makes no difference. And he's just there for rerolls now, I guess. He's a very good unit. I'm not going to say Scout Sentinels are strong, but the express purpose of this unit in 10th edition was to prevent Bring It Down from scoring or from redrawing itself. For 55 points, you get a screening model and a utility model, and also you can fuck your opponent secondary sometimes, and you can no longer do that. So interesting. All right, let's go back and grab our lists. We're almost through these guys. We had some Orks being played. I think Orks are in a really interesting spot these days because they have a lot of really good 2-point enhancements. Like when you compared, or 2-point detachments, excuse me. When you compared Warhorde to most of the other detachments in the game, Warhorde just had so much going on, right? Warhorde was like basically, a permanent offensive buff. It just gave you sustained hits 1, which is like essentially +1 to hit for your whole army for the entire game. It also gave you unbridled carnage, which is sort of additional damage output. It gave you hard as nails, which is survivability. It gave you here you go, which is threat range. So it basically buffed every component that you would want. The only downside is that you got 1 Wog turn, right, and then it were over. Whereas other detachments like do other things to get around that essentially. However, when you look at Orc detachments in totality, they have so many good ones that were just outshadowed by Warhorde when you compared them in a vacuum. So you're like, Bully Boys, I get double Wogs, sick. That's fucking amazing. However, if we compare it to all of those like flexible options that Warhorde gives you, you're just gonna take Warhorde. Green Tide, I get like permanent survivability amps and potentially threat range increases to all of my boys for the entire game. And I'm like very good as like this aggressive like disruption list that can take objectives really easily. But Warhorde does basically like half of that while also making your guys hit really, really hard. So I'm probably just going to take Warhorde. However, when you add the second detachment in here, so this guy's taking Tactical Brigade in addition, suddenly all of these 2 point, these trillion million 2-point detachments they have. Look at every detachment besides Warhorde is two detachment points. All of them look really good. And so like the build variety for Orks actually just skyrockets massively, which is neat and cool. The real reason that players played Warhorde was to Kareen. Yeah, for sure. So here we are with Green Tide and Tactical Brigade. So Tactical Brigade. I don't know what. Oh, we'll check Take and Hold, which is I think just the Green Tide disposition. It is. Tactical Brigade gives you advance and fall back and do actions with your boys, commandos, and storm boys. So you get overlapping buffs for both unit types. Both the storm boys and the regular boys, or storm boys, sorry, get overlapping buffs from both Green Tide and from Warhorde, because you're going to get the invuln save from Green Tide plus all the stratagems plus the advance do actions, which is wild. We have Gazgul Thraka, a pain boy. Alongside 20 boys. We have a war boss, a pain boy, alongside 20 boys. We have a war boss, a pain boy, alongside 20 boys. We have a weird boy alongside a big unit of boys. We can do this guy to redeploy himself and then get the charge bonus, which I think has been changed, if I remember correctly. Oh, nope, that's not right. It's in Green Tide. It's called Tide of Muscle, I want to say. It gives you +1 to charge and reroll charges. It used to give you a charge bonus based on the battle round of the game. So as the game went on, your unit got better and better at charging. But now it's just +1 to charge and rerolls, which is helpful. The big thing, too, is that gives you access to 2 potential charge rerolls over the course of a single turn. Whereas previously, you were locked into having a... just doing a command reroll, right? And then you couldn't duplicate on that unit, and you only get one of those. Getting 2 of them is a big deal. We get the timing of the surge move. Oh, this was the first one. Go get 'em was the first surge move I think they wrote. At least as a stratagem, and it always had lots of problems. There's an FAQ about it. This is an old FAQ. This doesn't do anything anymore. Fascinating. Yeah, I don't know. I think it is what it is for now, I guess. But it's like, yeah, it's going to change at some point. That's like an unfortunate templating issue that they never really resolved. Like what it should be is like you use it after an enemy has resolved its attacks, and then you surge, I think. We've got a big boss in a boy squad, another big boss just by himself, just as an individual character to go do actions. Wazdaka Gutsmech, a Storm Boys unit. Again, we can advance and do actions with them, so that's helpful. Plus a Gretchen unit, plus a Commando squad. So this is just a real like OC, just an OC bomb of an army. It's all protected by 5+ invulnerable save plus 5+ feel no pain, so it's relatively difficult to kill. In some cases, you can actually you can forward deploy it more aggressively than you did previously, because it was what's the word? Because you can deploy into hidden positions, and sometimes it gains cover, so it's also -1 to be hit. So it's actually just like slightly harder to kill than it was in last edition. And it's a million boys that run really far forward, so that's pretty cool. We love that for them. Seems good. I don't know, chats. We think it's good? I think it's good, chat. Last but certainly not least is Zach Point on Space Marines. Running Blade of Ultramar, kind of normal Blade of Ultramar stuff. What's interesting to me is that I'm curious whether Ultramarines survive as the preeminent like build for Space Marines in general, because I do think that there's a lot of really interesting builds elsewhere, and we're already seeing things like Salamanders and Iron Hands kind of taking the crown from them a little bit now that they can take 2 detachments, whereas Ultramarines are stuck into a single detachment if they play Blade of Ultramar or Gladius Task Force. That said, there is something to be said for playing some of the double, like 2 detachment combinations with them, where you play stuff like what's the word? You play stuff like Librarius Conclave plus, I don't know, a bunch of the other ones. I played a really interesting list the other day that was Librarius Conclave plus Bastion Task Force, and it was just a trillion Intercessor squads with Librarians in them. It was like 5 bricks of Intercessors with Librarians, so it's all advanced action shoot and all 4+ invuln and all anti-psychic, and I was like, this is a lot. Plus a Victrix Underguard unit with a Marnie's Calgar in it, which is obviously good. Speaking of which, here's Marnie's Calgar with a Victrix Underguard squad, Wardens of Ultramar, and a Blade Guard Veteran squad. These guys are support now, as I have learned, which means they have to attach into a unit, so you have to pick where they're going, which is a big difference. But they do give +1 OC to the unit, so they make the unit legitimately good at taking objectives, which is solid. An Intercessor squad, Assault Intercessors with jump packs, double Ballistus Dreadnought, an Incursor squad, double Land Speeder, a Repulsor Executioner, Scout squad, and a Storm Speeder. Ham Burglar Strike. Pretty normal stuff. Good things, Chance. So yeah, I don't know necessarily. I know Zach is like plays all sorts of stuff. I don't know necessarily if he was like super into Ultramarines, I guess, at this point. So this might have been just like the most what he knew, and rather than getting into some of the more esoteric build compositions, but I'd be interested to see if that is the case. Check the core rule for frame. I guess I will do that. It tells you how to move around. It tells you how to move models without a base. It doesn't actually tell you what to do on models with a base. It also almost explicitly tells you that frame models like exclusively don't have bases, which is obviously incorrect. I guess like is the rotate rule? Does that say base? I guess we can just go here. Yeah, I could be wrong here, chat. Rotating a model. Oh yeah, you're right. No, center of its base, and then so everything in the game rotates around its base, unless otherwise specified. All right, no, I'm totally wrong about that. That's good to know. I was under the impression that the rotate around the center axis was from frame was the overriding rule, but that's not the case. So if you do have a base and you overhang your base by a significant margin, you can gain movement off of it. Yeah. I mean, I don't think bikes should have frame at all. That's fucking wild, dude. Do any other like mounted units have frame? Does like Wazdaka have frame? No. This guy doesn't have frame, but a little like Vertus Praetor does. I think they're on the same base size even. No, he's a little bit bigger. He's the fat one. He's the fat base. Doesn't that mean you can measure charges from their spears? It does. It does mean that. Although their spears are like way off the ground, so I don't know how much that's gonna matter. Because you measure like actual like minimum charge distance in a straight line rather than a horizontal line with a vertical engagement. So it could be that it's actually like more difficult to make a charge than the charge you could than the movement you could potentially get into melee. Like it could require you to roll a 6 to get to engagement, but or to get to like a 1 inch or whatever. But it could be a 7-inch charge because of an angle, which is stupid. That's extremely dumb. That's maybe the dumbest rule change I've ever seen. I hate that. Do you like Outriders have frame? What would another like candidate for frame be? Like Reaver jet bikes, maybe? This is sending me so hard. Is it Reaver with an I? I think it is. Wait, what? Wait. What is the Drukhari jet bike guys called? They're called Reavers, right? Am I insane? Why? Oh, there it goes. Was I misspelling something? That was weird. Oh, maybe I put a space in it after the R. Maybe that's why it didn't show up. Because I thought they were Reaver jet bikes, but they're just Reavers now. That was weird. It wasn't like showing up in the search, but I think that might have been me. No frame. What about Skyrunners? No frame. These guys overhang their base by like a full inch. If anyone is going to get frame, it would be them. I cannot think of any other ones off the top. I guess like cavalry stuff. Like what about a Rendmaster? Nope. This guy overhangs his base by quite a bit too. I don't understand this yet. This is like so bizarre. It doesn't make sense to me that you would be doing that. I don't even think it's necessarily that good for them. Because it means that in some cases, like they have to, whereas if you are a base, if your base measure, you basically shrink down to your base size when determining whether or not you're in terrain or whether or not you can go through things. And if you frame measure, you always just are considered to be like your full volume, right? So it makes them like way more difficult to hide, for example. And especially for a non-infantry unit that can't be hidden, that's actually really bad. Like I don't think this is a positive change. I think it's like annoying and also bad. Yeah. Jesus Christ. Radom and Venom. Yeah, those are vehicles. We're looking at mounted units. So if anybody's just joining, the revelation today is that Vertus Praetors, for whatever reason, in the update, were given the frame keyword, which means they hull measure. So like, even though they have a normal size base that they mostly fit on, they measure from like the end of their spear to determine whether or not they're inside a terrain feature. I think that's just like way worse for them. You do dumb shit with pivots to get more movement. I mean, sometimes. It doesn't affect your charge rolls, but it will, like, you can go from sideways to going forward to, like, gain movement. Although, I think, like, I don't know, having, like, something's gonna be weird. There's nothing in the charge phase that says, like, you measure horizontal distance only, right? So I think something's gonna be weird if you measure like from the tip of the spear and you go downside, like downwards. I think that's actually gonna fuck up some people. That's also like part of my issue with clear charge. Yeah, you just roll like determine maximum distance. That's really stupid. I do not like it. I do not like it, chat. The less we can we can have any hull measures in the entire game, the better. The goal should be to reduce the number of hull measures, not increase them. And in 11th edition, they like doubled the number of hull measuring models in the game. Whereas we should be reducing it. Especially like little stuff, like the all the little vehicles that have a big base should just base measure. We should not be giving them frame keyword. It's sort of ludicrous. All right, we wanted to look at Necrons from Midwest Monstars, who did took second place actually, which is very nice. Good for them. Let's go. They ended up playing Obelisk Phalanx and Pharaon's Armories, which are playable together, which is pretty wild. So you get multiple overlapping buffs for the big things, because you can give them -1 damage in Obelisk Phalanx, and you get like the extra movement and stuff from Pharaon's Armory, which is massive. We are taking Disruption as our disposition. Taking Imhotech, Silent King, Canoptic Reanimator, Spiders, a Deathmark unit, double Locust Destroyers, an Obelisk. Holy shit. An actual, honest-to-God Obelisk, chance. That's nuts. This is, has, like, consistently been, like, one of the jokiest units in the entire game. The reason being is that it is, checks notes. I guess it's, like, actually not that expensive these days. They have maybe reduced it to the point that it's reasonable. 280 points. And you get 4 of these. It's 24 shots at 701. So it shoots as hard as like many, like, I don't know. You like compare them to like an intercessor squad. And these guys are like sustained hits too or something. But they have no AP characteristic. And they shoot like marginally more times with some keywords than an intercessor squad shoots that also has like AP1 and some multi-damage guns. So you like compare this 280 point super heavy to like a 100-point battle line unit or an 80-point battle line unit, and they have like not dissimilar damage output. And you're like, hold up. Wait a minute. What's going on right now? But if it's this big fucking idiot who moves 14 inches because of Pharaon's Armory, he's OC8 so he can steal objectives, and you can give him -1 damage. So he's just this massive like brick of stats. He's also 2+ base save. So you can use the Armor of Contempt from Pharaon's Armory on him. He actually, for 280, is really annoyingly hard to kill. He also halves enemy movement characteristics and does mortal wounds to things that fly, which is interesting. He also has the Mortality Shroud upgrade. I don't even know what that does. You make people take a battle shock check. So I guess the idea is that we're just Yeetus Begeetusing this thing into the middle of the opponent's army, and we can do like the movement. You can fuck with counter charges, like movement stuff, and then also force people to take battle shock checks after we shoot them. That's interesting. I love that. I love that there is a use case for just the fucking derpiest unit in the entire game. This for multiple years, I think. I know Stat Check used to do like a worst model in the game, like worst data sheet in the game thing for a while, and the Obelisk was just the worst for so long, for like 5 years. I think it was like unplayably bad, and maybe we've come back around. Let's go! What a time to be alive. I guess there's like maybe some fortifications or something that might have been worse, but this is like somewhere around there. Ophidian Destroyers, a Tesseract Vault, Tomb Blades, 3 Triarch Stalkers. One of them has a heavy Gauss Cannon array, so he shoots farther. So we can strip cover from people with the Triarch Stalkers. The Stalkers are also really good like early game utility because they scout and they're really annoying to kill. They have a 4+ Sinvald save and have a billion wounds for some reason. For only 110 points, and they have a little flamer. So they can go in and like clear your opponent's utility and strip cover from things, so you can shoot them with the Tesseract Vault and the Obelisk. This list is fascinating. I love it. So it's like the Silent King and just 2 big Goombas. And then the rest of the list is a million utility units that I'll run around. That's very fun. Could be anti-Lord of Change tech. I could see that. Anti-fly is not too bad. Assuming you're ignoring cover from from a friendo, a Triarch Stalker. You're shooting 24 and you're hitting 24 most likely because you get sustained 2s. And let's assume that we were not rerolling 1s here. So you're handing your opponent 12 saves. I guess you're only taking like 6 damage. But then if you also do damage with the mortal wound thing, maybe it's fine. Amazing. That's cool. That's a fun list. Thanks for recommending we take a look at that, chat. All right. We can talk about the winning team from 5-mans. Which was the good old Team Battle Brothers. In 5-mans, you're a little bit more restricted on what you can take because you're not allowed to duplicate any force dispositions. So we're just taking 1 of each. So we have Tau on Purge, probably on Montka. Davis Fry playing Tau. Very good. It's Retaliation Cadre. All right. Well, that's more interesting. We'll have to take a look at that. Tyranids on Disruption. Space Marines on Recon. Interesting. Necrons on Priority Assets. Thousand Suns on Take and Hold. Fascinating. So, Tau Empire on Retaliation Cadre. We did talk about a actually wild Retaliation Cadre list that won a GT this weekend. That was basically playing Oops All Battlesuits. It had like a couple of utility units, and then literally everything else was a Crisis Battlesuit, which is fucking awesome. So it's Commander Farsight and a Sunforged Battlesuit team, so we can get +1 to wound and reroll everything and stuff. We have an Enforcer Battlesuit with Starflare Ignition in a Fire Knife Battlesuit team with Plasmas. Looks like a lot of people are taking Plasmas over missiles these days, but they're very good against heavy infantry and like light vehicles and stuff. So this unit is explicitly designed to like clear out your opponent's utility early. You basically like wait for them to go up and take an objective, and then you drop into a position where only a few things can shoot you back, and you can kill that unit, and then you get rid of them, and then you push on. Like you just keep uppy downing them. And then being able to do that pretty consistently with all this plasma shooting is good. Plus, you're a good like anti-medium or heavy infantry unit. We have a Cold Star Commander Battlesuit with a Starsight Battlesuit team, so we can give them assault, and they shoot a million times. Another Cold Star Commander Battlesuit in a Sunforged Battlesuit team, so we have another anti-tank unit. Twin Lance, because they rule. Starscythe Battlesuits, just individually as a utility squad. Carnivores for Obsac, Pathfinders, Riptide, Stealth Battlesuits, Vespid, yeah. The like double Pathfinder, double Stealth Battlesuit, Vespid might as well just be added to your list when you build a Tau army. It's a lot of Crisis Battlesuits. It's interesting that, I guess we're taking Purge, so we could have taken Montka. But I think that this list is a little bit more consistent than Montka, because Montka's built so much around the Alpha Strike, and if you hit an opponent that, and to be clear too, 5-player teams are so much less consistent in terms of the pairing process than 8-player teams, because a lot of the pairings are just kind of random. Because you have so many fewer selections during the process of where your players are gonna go. You don't have the same control over your matchups. So your armies, I think, generally sort of trend towards being almost a more singles format, where you're taking the one faction and one disposition per army, but you're not necessarily building in order to explicitly counter anything. And I think that these armies for Tau that are a little bit more well-rounded, rather than being this big Alpha Strike, is good if you hit the positions where you cannot necessarily Alpha Strike your opponent out. Eric Horriger, playing Tyranids, was running Vanguard Onslaught Ambush Predators. I'm interested in this, by the way, chat. Ambush Predators is very, very popular. And I don't know if I understand it. And I don't know what I'm missing. It might just be the fact that, like, you can uppy downy your lictors, and your lictors are, like, pretty cool. But, like, I don't know how much I care about that. I'm going to switch my batteries one sec, chat, on my headset. Otherwise, I can't hear when you super chat me. Nice. Working on myself like a cyborg. So it gives you reroll hits of 1 on explicitly lictors and neurolictors against character units, and it gives you deep strike, which is good for utility. Like, you can up down your lictors and then deep strike with them. It also gives you the extra detection range thing, but like, we're not really shooting anyone. We in fact have basically no guns in this entire army. So I'm curious about this because it does mean you can't take Warrior Bioform. Which does feel like it has, I guess in this case we aren't taking that many warriors, so I guess it makes sense. But that does feel like it has some like very explicit but benefits. It plays the disposition really well. Oh, it's disruption. I see. Okay. I think why we took this, chat, is that we were already seeding Recon to Mark Hurdle. So instead of being able to take another, so we had to fill a disruption slot somewhere, and so you take Ambush Predator, so you can do that. Otherwise you'd be playing Recon most likely, or you could play Take and Hold with Warrior Bioform, which feels very consistent, to be honest. I do like that quite a bit. But I guess it's just like interesting because it doesn't feel like the most insane like detachment for one detachment point. To be honest, a lot of the Tyranid 1-pointers do feel kind of like a nothing burger. I think maybe the most impactful one is the Norn one, if you are already playing like 2+ Norns. But the other ones do feel like you can kind of interchange them and they don't really do that much. I have very rarely noticed the effects of them, which is unfortunate. Unless you're playing the enhancements in Warrior Bioform, which are actually nuts. Excuse me, chat. I didn't have my app up. But here is here is the ability for Ambush Predators. It gives you reroll hit rolls of 1 into characters explicitly for only Death Leaper, Nick Lictor, and Neurolictors. Apparently Death Leaper also doesn't gain the rerolls. Oh, is Death Leaper Lictor keyworded actually? No, get fucked. That's so weird. I guess it's like classic Tyranid design where it's like I hate that I can't just go back to where I was. That's so annoying. In this app sucks. It's like classic Tyranid design that you would have like bizarre anti-synergy like built into your army. Like, why does the detachment not affect Von Reinsleepers? Why do like only the stratagems affect Von Reinsleepers, not the detachment rule? I don't know. Why does one half of the detachment rule not affect Death Leaper? I don't know. It's just fucking weird, dude. Is it possible to force units to take multiple battle shock tests each phase or turn? Yes, outside of the battle shock step of your opponent's command phase. The battle shocks are exclusive in the battle shock step, so you can't, for example, force a battle shock for being below starting strength and for being below half strength, or it has strength or below. However, you can, for example, force them to take one of those battle shock checks in the battle shock step, and then use another ability to take a battle shock test later on in the phase. But otherwise, battle shocks just like stack infinitely, essentially. It's just that you don't suffer any additional penalties for failing them. You're just still battle shocked, basically. So we're taking double Broodlord with Gene Stealers. These guys are great for instigating fights. Sometimes you can 2-for-1 with them too. If you hit little tiny units and you can sink the Broodlord into 1 unit of 5, for example, and then get all the Gene Stealers into a second unit, you get like 20 attacks onto a unit, which will kill them. And then the Broodlord swings with Strength 7, AP 2 damage, devastating. So there's a non-zero chance that you can find a way to get to kill like 5 Space Marine bodies, for example. If things have to go your way a little bit, but it can often happen. So these guys are very nice for relatively cheap. 1 Lashwood Tyranid Prime with Hormigons, another unit that's incredible at in dealing with multiple enemies. Hyper Adapted Raveners, which is an interesting pick. I've been kind of like ambivalent about these guys. They're like wildly expensive. They're just massively expensive. The big benefit is that they can rapid ingress for free, and they can do it even if another unit rapid ingressed. So if you are playing in a situation where you have a ton of, like, a bunch of reserve units that can all come in and kind of like crash on your opponent in round 2, for example, you can just drop all your Raveners into really annoying spots. The other thing too is that they can rapid ingress for free, and then they can pick up at the end of your opponent's fight phase. So a lot of times what they can do is rapid ingress and force your opponent to play around their presence, and then they just leave. And they threaten it again next turn, which is very cute. So we have 2 units of those. The downside, I think, in my opinion, I wish they had access to a 5+ invuln somewhere. The problem is that this unit is like the easiest unit in the entire game to kill for points. It's crazy. They are a 4+ save, no invulnerable, and 3 wounds each, and that's it. That's all they got going for them. So as soon as they get punched, they immediately all die, which does feel bad for 280. We have a Red Terror, which is interesting. Is the Red Terror a Vanguard Invader? That would be on her data sheet. She is. So Red Terror can get... that's interesting. The Red Terror can get a lot of the stratagems and advance and charge. So she's actually very good at closing the distance early. She also has like mobile, kind of, with this ability, where you can move through terrain features, which allows you to deploy kind of aggressively early, and then clear out your opponent's utility, and then just jump into reserve and then rapid ingress later. And you can rapid ingress, obviously, in addition to the hyper adept at the same time. So that's very curious. There's also the case where every once in a while you hit the Red Terror in a position where you drop plunder, and then you get to deep strike, complete plunder, and then go into reserve, which is fucking sick. And sometimes you also get it on a mission secondary, but mission secondaries usually take a full turn to complete. But if it's a single phase action, you can complete the action and then just leave. Which every time it happens is the most glorious thing in the world. We have a Biovore, a Lictor, double Mawlocks, which is interesting, but they are Vanguard Invaders as well. So you can use the stratagem to pick up both of them every turn. And then they can drop back down with Deep Strike and generate a bunch of mortal wounds on your opponent, and Battle Shock tests, which is always also helpful. 1 Lictor, double Neuro Lictor, and a Von Ryan Sleeper unit. Which is 75 points for some reason. Is there an enhancement or something? VRLs are 60. There's an upgrade, but it's not listed on their profile. I see. So they're paying for cryptophotic camouflage. That's a cool word. So that's a minus detection range. -3 detection range. So if you deploy the VRLs in Gone to Ground and turn 1, then they are -6 detection range. So they have a 9-inch detection. Well, that would be a reason to play into Ambush Predators, I guess. I did not realize that we were taking that, actually. That's really cool. So that makes this unit like really obnoxious as a just as a utility piece. They're relatively small. They're not the easiest thing in the world to kill for 60 points. They're T5 with 3 wounds, so like sometimes they live. They have fight first, so if your opponent engages a bunch of different things, sometimes you get value from them. And they're really fast, so they can just like run up and attack stuff turn 1. I guess like with Vanguard Invasion or Vanguard Onslaught, or excuse me, you can advance and charge with them. So you can deploy them kind of aggressively because your opponent can't shoot them. And then with Ambush Predators, with Vanguard Invasion, because they're Vanguard Invaders, you can advance and charge. And then if you charge onto, for example, your opponent's expansion, you can use Counter Predation because your opponent's going to be hidden, and you get +1 strength and AP. So you get a strength 6, AP 2 at a baseline, maybe strength 7 if you're synapsed, but you won't be synapsed, so it's fine. That's very interesting. So you can clear screens really effectively with them early. And then to generate command points for that, we have Swarm Lord, which I think I've been playing basically nothing but Hive Tyrants recently in Tyranids, and I think I'm coming around to Swarm Lord just because being able to mess with people's interrupts and defensive strats in melee is massively important for things like Hyper Adepted to be able to like survive the fight phase. All right, I'm coming around on this Ambush Predators thing, chat. I think that the VRLs are definitely like a big benefit there. All right, here's a cool one. Mark Hurdle did take the reconnaissance slot because he's playing Vanguard Spearhead with a Librarius Conclave. I'm sure there's going to be some absolutely fucking nuts combinations in here. I don't know if he's selected it. Oh, he's playing, it looks like he's playing Ultramarines so that we get access to Uriel Ventress, which makes sense. That gives you Deep Strike so that you can use guerrilla tactics to up down your units and then redeploy them around the table using Deep Strike, which is helpful. And I imagine what we're going to do what we're going to apply that to is a Fusillade unit of Sternguard veterans. If I had to hazard a guess, that's what we would be doing. So we have company heroes with Uriel Ventress, just a good little unit. We want to take Uriel for the support effects anyway, plus he also gets to mess with your command points usage, so he's just helpful. Chief Librarian Tigurius with a Sternguard veteran squad. I know Mark loves this brick because you can shoot at the Oath target, and then Tigurius gets 1 billion shots with Psychic, so he ignores cover now with full rerolls, and then you also get some damage out of the Sternguard veterans too, which is nice. We get I guess also Tigurius gives you free access to Heroic Intervention as well. We get a Librarian with Temporal Corridor, so he's able to uppy downy himself. Believe is what that detachment does now, or that thing does now. So at the end of your opponent's fight phase, you can place yourself into Strategic Reserve. If you have Telekinesis active, you can use Deep Strike, or you could just have your Uriel Ventress apply Deep Strike to you, so you don't necessarily need it. We then actually, he's going to do that on the Fusillade unit, but these guys can just uppy downy in addition to the Fusillade unit uppy downying for a command point, essentially. Librarius has up down in the explicitly in the form of this enhancement. Librarius has no stratagems. You only get enhancements in the detachment ability from Librarius Conclave. So then we have the Fusillade guy with the Sternguard veterans. So they shoot the Oath target, they get full rerolls, and they have anti-monster, anti-vehicle 5 with devastating wounds. We get 2 Oaths of Moment thanks to Roboute Gilliman. And then we have an Intercessor squad, an Impulsor, probably to carry around Uriel Ventress, a JPI squad, an Inceptor squad. These guys are another unit that's fairly good with guerrilla tactics because they can 6-inch Deep Strike when they come back in. The downside, of course, is that nowadays you used to take these guys so that you could guerrilla tactics on the top of one and then still Deep Strike back in, whereas other units like Centurions, for example, that you couldn't target with Uriel Ventress, you'd have to only up down on turn 2. There's no way to come back in the first battle round if you have just a normal like uppy downy effect where you go into strat reserve. You need to have one that explicitly notes that you arrive on the next turn. So it's not quite as useful as it was previously, but the unit's still good. It's not like you're not going to get value out of them for just like jumping in and blowing people up. I even think the plasma version is probably pretty sweet too, especially because you can give them. It should be noted you can give them +1 to hit and +1 AP from Strike from the Shadows. So the assault bolters can be hitting on 2s, assuming you're not firing into cover. I don't think we have a way to strip cover in this attachment. I can't remember though. Assuming you're not firing into cover, you're hitting on 2s, rerolling everything from Oath of Moment. So you can have one unit that's jumping in with like Fusillade, just blasting people, and then these guys jump in and blast somebody else. You unlock the second Oath of Moment once one of those things is dead, thanks to Recon Element. So theoretically, both units are full rerolling. And these guys can fish for sustained hits too, which should generate them 20% more shots, basically, than they started with. And then they're twin linked as well. So they're full hit and wound rerolls, and wounding everything in the game on 5s or better. At AP2, which is like kind of nutty. Then we have an Infiltrator Squad, Double Scout Squad for utility. So this is very Mark Hurl fucking coded. It's so funny. This man has a type, and he just loves these like aggro lists that can jump units around everywhere. I do think that these up-down detachments are less good than they were last edition because of the lack of ability to do that on turn 1. Or in Battle Round 1, I should say. But, once it's on the table, and especially these armies that are like, because we're doing so much with the librarians themselves, not only are they improving their mobility by jumping up and down and improving their output by shooting the oath target and getting rerolls, but they are also gaining a 4+ invulnerable save. So they're not even that easy to kill in the crackback as well. Sometimes they will just live through the counterattack. And especially if your opponent has a lot of like, what's the word? Psychic weapons, they can be very, very resilient. The other thing too is that up-down effects allow you to, like, a lot of armies are very incentivized to deploy farther back in order to keep themselves hidden. Now, this army doesn't do a lot of shooting like on the ground. It doesn't have a lot of like long range gun platforms, but you're still going to try to keep your units inside terrain features to gain hidden and cover. But that means that in most cases they are not actually screened from deep striking units. So deep strikers can come in and just shoot them immediately, because you can almost always deep strike into detection range, unless you have one of those like weird 6-inch detection range things. So it's very difficult. I would say it's way more difficult to screen deep strikers in 11th edition than it is previously. So while those armies have a tougher time actually delivering themselves, when they are able to do so, they do it so much with like so much more aplomb effectively. Pretty cool. We have a Necron army in priority assets. This is with Starshatter Arsenal. So this was the this is like where I expected a lot of Necrons to come from, but I guess we weren't doing that so much. It's a Chrono Impedance Fields Technomancer, a miniaturized Nebuloscope Locust Lord, so you ignore cover with him. And then he's applying that to Locust Destroyers that are going to fish for criticals. 5-up critical, lethal, plus sustain for Necrosaur Emitar. So being able to get more hits out of your rerolls is very nice, because we're not necessarily rerolling in order to hit the 3-up. We have a single Scorpic Lord as an independent unit. Silent King, double Doomsday Arcs, Canoptic, Reanimator, Locust Heavy Destroyer, Flayed One, Ophidian Destroyer, Triarch Stalker. Yeah, it's kind of normal stuff. The Locust Destroyers are definitely new, but I think a lot of people are taking them because, honestly, the unit is not very expensive. We were just talking about Hyper Adapted Raveners, which is this like entirely melee unit that costs like 50 points more than these guys. And these guys are around the same level of resilience. The Locust Lords are much more difficult to kill. If the Locust Lord survives the attack, you start regenerating Locust Destroyers, and they shoot like not dissimilar throughout damage output, but they do it at range. So it's like, honestly, even with an enhancement, the unit comes in at 245. That's very reasonable. And they, just seem very good. I don't know. The other thing too is like they're not worrying about the -1 AP for cover, because they can get hit rerolls if you're on an objective. They oftentimes don't really care about cover anyway, and of course this unit's going to ignore it generally. But it used to be that you could stack cover with a defensive bonus, and they would actually just like bounce off you. So they could hand you a million saves, but you're saving on like 3s, and then you're just like blanking damage or something, and the final damage going through is not very high. But now that you're saving the AP characteristic matters a lot more. Firing at AP2 is a massive deal. Last and certainly not least is TJ Lanigan on Thousand Suns. Running, he played this in the event that I live streamed last week, which was Summer Ruin. Hexwarp Thrallbrand plus Ritual Regeneration. So instead of focusing on the Sekitar robots as like a lot of the skirmishing in the army, he's gaining a lot of benefit from these Rubric Marine squads that he can buff with Ritual of Regeneration. Now I know there was a weird Yeah, looks like we only have one. Terminator Sorcerer's Curse of Life. There was a question about an enhancement in this detachment that needed to get ruled some way. Oh, I see. I think it might be this guy. So I know that he had to get it ruled at that event, and I don't know if ATC ruled on it. But basically, it's when because it's an infantry only Thousand Suns model, and when that model heals as a result of Sorcerous Invigoration, which is the detachment rule that says when you pass a battle shock or a Kabbalistic ritual check, you gain wounds back. You add 3 to the heal count. However, you very rarely are healing that model. So the question is whether or not this 20-point enhancement is meant to heal the unit or the model, if this is a typo. And if it is able to heal the unit, then obviously that guy ends up being pretty sick. But and also the question is like, is this model passing a Kabbalistic ritual check like considered to be that model healing wounds in general, or is it only wounds that are healed off that model in specific? It's a little bit strange. If this was the weird part is that this is like a relatively expensive enhancement. 3 wounds is a lot to add, so it's D3 plus 3 on the healing instead of just D3. But if it affects only the model itself, then it's super not worth it, because generally like your sorcerers are going to be dead most likely, rather than get the opportunity to cast Kabbalistic rituals an additional time. They're either in a unit or they're destroyed. There's very few chances, very few times where your sorcerer is on the battlefield, not destroyed, and his unit's been killed and he can heal himself. Unless your opponent like tries to precision him and fails or something. But if it was like a 10-point enhancement, I don't think anyone would question it. But 20 points is like makes it really weird. So I don't know how they ruled it at that place. Because it doesn't not work how it's written right now, I don't know if I would roll it any particular way, but it is very strange that it does feel like it's potentially typoed. We have an Infernal Master with Rubrics, a Sorcerer with Empiric Onslaught. That's, I believe, while you're within flow of magic, you get bonus attacks. While you're wholly within your army's, your unit is wholly within your army's flow of magic, add 3 to the attack characteristic of ranged psychic weapons equipped by the bearer. Because the sorcerer then can also use his once per game to improve his attacks characteristic, he gets 12 shots, I believe. His sustained hits 3. You can get rerolls from Kabbalistic rituals, so he goes crazy. We have a sorcerer in Terminator armor with the Curse of Life, as we talked about. We have Magnus the Red, a Defiler, and triple Zangor Enlightened. Pretty straightforward. I do like that we found a place for Magnus the Red to live that isn't necessarily Grand Coven. So because inside Hexwarp Thrallband, we can source +1 to wound or rerolls for the flow of magic mechanic. Magnus doesn't feel quite as sort of like locked in on the having to be affected by the rerolls from Grand Coven. So he feels like he can get value out of his psychic weapons inside Hexwarp Thrallband just fine. Plus, he's also he's a very consistent ritual caster. A little bit of a weird thing is that inside he doesn't get affected by the ritual, the regeneration detachment. So because it is non-monster, I believe, which means that you oftentimes want to be casting your rituals with your Rubric Marines and stuff to get guys back. Yeah, so without Psyker units excluding monsters, manifesting rituals heal D3. I don't think there's anything that like works on him, right? Basically all infantry stuff. Yeah. You can advance and perform actions with infantry, though. That's actually kind of sick. It does require that you are psychic, though. So like you want to be in the early game, you can cast with Magnus and then get your rituals off very consistently, but you do like run into this weird situation where you're as the game goes on, you want to cast less and less spells from Magnus because you want to be getting the rerolls or the healing from your other detachment. Watch Hexwarp go to 3 or no robots in the next hotfix. I would not be surprised if it gained. What's the Sekitar thing? What's the Sekitar key? Nope, not that one. It doesn't have a key. So I wouldn't be surprised if these guys got if this detachment got a tag on it, so it couldn't be duplicated alongside Hexwarp Thrallband. I honestly I don't even know necessarily if that's like the final solution. I think you could just make it so that Sekitar robots are more expensive, or they have been starting to do more expensive data sheets for specific sub-factions, and I've been kind of against this in the past, but they could do it where units are more expensive in particular detachments, where it's like, if you take Sekitar cohort, your robots are like plus 30 points or something. But the real thing is that, like, I think even in a vacuum, it's probably the case that Sekitar robots at 40 points per model are too efficient for their cost. Because you get an infiltrating unit that's kind of like a little difficult to kill, has good shooting, and gets Overwatch for free, and is relatively fast. So they like do a bunch of different things for really inexpensively, which I think is the heart of the issue. I don't think necessarily like at a fundamental level the interactions that detachment, the combination of the detachments bring is like broken. I just think that it's being applied to units that are way too cheap. Anyway, chat, that's all the winners of the ATC events. I don't know if we can, especially for 5-player team events, as they're difficult to sort of discern any sort of like meaningful meta from it. However, it is interesting to see the compositions for the 8-player events being constructed. So we'll see sort of how things end up going. I don't know. I think there's some interesting implications here, and especially for 5-player teams, you can still look at it and mostly get a good idea of like what's good in a singles format as well from them. It does feel like Thousand Suns, Tau Empire, Tyranids are basically like in almost all of these builds. Orks, I guess, to a lesser extent as well. Yeah, Orks are in most of these. But that does sort of showcase to you which factions are, close to the top of the metagame. The Necron stuff, I don't know if I would look at quite as hard, just because of right now. I think the Necron code, like the Necron faction, is sort of like this open question that needs to get addressed in the next update. Put Bastion at 2 for Black Templars. I don't know, man. Maybe. Bastion does have a lot of interesting builds. I do think it would maybe be a little bit silly at 2. I don't know what you combo with though. What are the 1-point Space Marine attachments that are good? Can we just look at our reference sheets? It would be... I guess you would get it with the Black Templar stuff, right? So you would end up taking like one of the Black Templar 1-pointers. So you could take Living Miracle. Marshall's Household actually might be sweet, because you could gain all the benefits for Sword Brethren and then also take Hero of the Chapter on a character inside a Sword Brethren squad. And then you get a super duper Sword Brethren unit. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, chance. I think that's going to be it for me today. Good discussion about team events. I think just right now, being able to go through list compositions and look at all the interesting detachment combinations people are still experimenting with is cool. I am happy so far that it doesn't seem like the game has devolved into, explicit list combinations that you have to play in order to be competitive. It does feel like a lot of combinations are open, and there's a lot of build variety in different factions, especially in singles events. And I hope that continues. So I'm crossing my fingers. I'm cautiously optimistic about that. Yeah. Otherwise, chat. I don't know if I'll be live later today, but I will be live tomorrow. We're gonna do some discussion of X and 1 results from the past weekend, looking at even more competitive compositions, which should be fun. And I will likely be live with some gameplay or something as the week goes on. Right now, I'm trying to like lock into a Tyranid list that I'm like really excited about. I was playing Subterranean Assault for a while, and it's felt good, but the fact that you can't build tunnels on turn 1 is like really sending me, and I'm kind of like burning out of it. It feels like I'm not using any stratagems from the detachment. I'm just using reroll ones to hit, which it turns out is a very good detachment ability. But is that worth 3 detachment points? I don't know. So we'll see. So I might go back to playing Vanguard or something like that as the sort of meta game develops, I guess. But I'm probably going to be playing more games of that and uploading all my games to my second channel. I think that's at exclamation point replays, or that might be on Twitch. I guess it is. So that's at youtube.com/TacticalTortoise is where my second channel is, and I've been putting all of my replay stuff over there. So please go check that out. Otherwise, yeah, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching, everybody. Keep classy, folks, and I'll be on tomorrow. Bye.